As we look forward to coming out of the pandemic-induced economic slump, we're hearing more and more use of the term the Great Reset. This is a new buzzword being used by politicians and NGOs to describe what they claim will be a rebuilding of society and business in a so-called sustainable, better way. This particular topic was recently discussed on a webinar put on by the Canada Strong and Free Network. One of the panelists was Rex Murphy, and this video consists of extracts from his comments.
I want to talk about the term, the Great Reset. Well, we're going to have a mediocre reset, or we'll have a reset that doesn't know anything, or we'll have a negative reset. It's such a trite piece of English, just to begin with, and an attempt to plaster some sort of vacuous Coke is it label on some fantastical projections, obviously by the elites that congregate in mountain resorts and have their vast meetings either for global warming or at Davos or anywhere else. And in my mind, it's also hinged very directly. You can hear it from the Prime Minister of Britain. You can hear it from the person who thinks he's Prime Minister of Canada. You can hear it from Mr. Biden that we're going to build back better. Well, once again, I'd question that. No one was suggesting that we should build back worse or we build back the same way. They're so trite that they should be laughed at just from the beginning. And the idea that we take probably the most savage attack on the world's economy since 1945 and the tumult of anxieties and worries that attend a pandemic, and then spuriously, meretriciously attempt to yoke that into a predetermined agenda that existed long before COVID, the global warming enterprise, or call it what you will. It is the fanatical dedication to an apocalyptic idea. It's millenarian in the worst sense of that term. And those who are obsessed by it have no conscience. They're willing to take the great national and international tragedy of a vast pandemic, and if by some ways they can weld it to their already predetermined and, in my judgment, absolutely false agenda, we're now being presented with the idea that the politicians think this is the moment to leap. People are psychologically at their weakest. Financially, when this thing lifts, we're also going to be at our weakest. We have had suspended civil liberties for well over a year to a degree we have not seen outside of wartime, psychologically, politically, economically, and socially. If there's a moment to slip through an agenda that could not face an ordinary election, this is it. This is a shifty move. And however vague it may be coming out of Davos and however soft the propaganda may be, the only reason I think to justify what we're doing here today is to add, as a quote to Bible, one still small voice, well, three still small voices, to say, watch out, folks. We have it hard now, but there are people manipulating the present psychological, political, and medical moment to do something we do not want. Under COVID, we have seen the greatest shrinkage, the greatest emasculation, I don't mind using sexist terms, of the Canadian parliamentary system, the full flourishing function of our parliamentary democracy, the ideas of accountability. We've poured out over $400 to $500 billion without a budget. This should tell you what it is when people decide to take advantage of a crisis. And then in the middle of our biggest crisis, we suspend the only instrument of examination, accountability, and parliamentary governance. What will they do if they get some pass to bring on this? This agenda has been around since the WTO riots of 1998. It's the same thing over and over and over, always putting on a new cheap jacket. And the jacket this time is the Great Reset. It's like a line out of a bad B movie. Environmentalists are let's be candid. They are anti the world we're in. They despise industry. They hate energy. And in some weird way, if they want to live in the Wizard of Id until it comes to them. The last point I'm making, I'll shut up. You will note that all of this, the great forest of NGOs and the great summits in Paris and Rio de Janeiro and the high capitals of the world, when they go out to save the world, they go out in numbers like Attila the Hun's followers. They go to the best places. They're always on someone else's dime. Environmentalism could not exist without the society that it actually criticizes continually, and it is a parasite. It is a parasite on the very society that it condemns. If our civilization fell, there would be no need of the environmentalist. It is the strongest, most enduring idea. It has millions behind it, and it is a propaganda machine. And by last point, no government, and by the way, no opposition. Aaron O'Toole could be Justin Trudeau as far as the Paris Climate Accords. This has, you asked the question, what can you, it has to be resisted. You have to speak out against it, and you have to defy the conventional idea that if you deny global warming, you're some sort of benighted Neanderthal. Push back against accepted thinking, and don't listen to what you hear on almost every single television station and radio, because they've been drenched in this garbage and know no better. There's never been a time since 1945 when Parliament has been so amputated, restricted, and dismissed. People are not startled, and they should be, when we had for 3 or 4 months a lone prime minister walking down the steps of his then residence and throwing out 20 and 30 and 40 and $50 billion every morning. Not a sight of a cabinet minister, no opposition, the press under some carnival tent. We should worry very, very much that government, having tasted the license of non-accountability, non-attendance in the Commons, and passing regulations at will. When 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you said, I'd like to see if there are other arguments about whether or not there is an apocalyptic global warming in our future. I'd like to know the status of the data that can project to 2100. I would like to hear the voices of some absolutely credentialed scientists that are not allied with institutes for global warming and hear what they have to say. If Frederick Dyson, Nobel physicist, has a perspective on this that challenges the stewed up, press-fed opinions of the ultimists, the millenarians, if you criticize this, the inverted commas, famously Al Gore, the science is settled, probably the most ignorant statement in the history of the world, you were a denier. They wanted to tie you to the Holocaust, which is the most vile insult that ever came out. That also tells me, this is a side point, that the people who fashion good causes and who see themselves as Galahad saving the world, they are often quite vicious. I question the charity of their hearts when in the place of an argument, they turn around and more or less call you a Nazi denier. We've got to throw off this self-imposed blanket on what we say and what we think. And there's no bigger moment, and there's no more critical one than the one we're at now, where the COVID is winding down and governments and institutions and NGOs and environmental associations are going to attempt to yoke the atmosphere and the policies and the government oversight that fitted a pandemic to ramming through an agenda that less than a third of the population has even heard of and even less approve of. The global warming ideology is not as direct and instant a plague as COVID-19, but it is a plague. and we should all fight every implication of it. The Great Reset may be the envelope term for that, but every chance you get, from town hall to coffee shop to the Houses of Parliament, whenever you hear this stream of radicalized ideological nonsense, bark back.